Now, as we step into 2025, many of us are setting goals for the year, and I believe that most of us are trying to think on how they can be debt-free, because this is one of the things that you need to thrive when you're getting into business and when you've become an entrepreneur. Now, in the studio today, we are joined by a financial educator who's going to be helping us to know how we can be able to make sure as individuals, as businesses, how we can be debt-free as we get into the year 2025. And I'm joined by Nyarazo Chahurula. How are you, Nyarazo?
I'm okay, Kudzi, and you?
I'm great. How's the new year so far?
It's promising to be very good, actually. I'm enjoying myself
Awesome.
so far.
That's great. That's great. Now, let me get straight into it, Nyarazo. Now, what are the first steps individuals or businesses should take when creating a plan to eliminate debt?
Yeah, so for me, what I would actually encourage people when you talk of debt elimination is the mindset to start with. I was just looking at one newspaper, and this is, schools are opening tomorrow, and already I see their loans, they're offering school fee loans. But when you decide on your own that I want to be debt free, these are the things that you're like, so how can I prepare so that I don't have to be borrowing, especially for your recurring expenditures? So you know for a fact that you will need school fees in January, you will still need school fees in May, so already you start planning ahead, so that is probably the best thing. Your mindset should shift from this mentality that when I'm stressed or when I'm stranded, I can always borrow. Mm-hmm. So your mindset has to shift from that and know that I have to save for these recurring expenses. So probably that will be the first and most important thing I can say.
All right. So basically what you're saying that as people are starting the year, this is one of the things they should prioritize, that is saving money.
Right.
Save so that you don't borrow.
So that you don't have to borrow, especially for these recurring expenses.
Because you already know that you need fees, you need etc., rent and stuff like that.
Yes, the basic things, right?
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now, how can one effectively prioritize debt to pay off? Should they focus on high interest loans or smaller debts first?
Yeah, so we do have different types of debt repayment methods that are there. We have one called the debt avalanche and the other one the debt snowball method. Mm-hmm. And so basically both of them look at the two that you've already mentioned. So depending on individuals, like what it is that motivates you. So for some people, it's motivating to start for lack of a better word, let's say killing the smaller debts first. Mm-hmm. So for that one, you know that, okay, I have a debt of say $100, I have another one $300, I have another one $3,000. So for some, it is actually motivating to kill the smaller debt first, and now the funds you were using to pay, you move them to the next bigger one until you are done with paying. And that is the snowball effect. It's like a snowball effect, so that's how it works. And then the debt avalanche method, on the other hand, you are saying, I want to kill the high interest debt first. Why? Because it costs a lot more. So if you have, say, a debt of 18% and another one of 10%, and maybe you have, loan sharks can even get to 40%. So you would rather pay off the high interest. So I cannot prescribe and then say use this method over this method, but it's more of what is it that motivates you the most. Because what you want to do is, as you pay off, you want to be encouraged and say, wow, I'm doing it, and I want to pay off until you become debt free.
Okay. Now, I've got this question. Why is it it's hard for people to clear the debt? From your experience?
From my experiences, it's really psychology, if anything at all. Psychology, because I will tell you of my experience. As you said, the bank will come to you and say, Kudzi, you qualify for this kind of loan. Mm-hmm. And when you hear the word qualify, Kudzi, how does that make you feel? Like, yes, I've earned it,
Exactly,
so you end up now feeling, I think I should get this one. And because you're in it already, when you try to pay it off, then you realize no, you have to keep living, so more expenses keep coming. So I still have to pay school fees, even though I have this vehicle I'm supposed to pay off. So what's the next thing? I now look for somebody else to lend to me. But we say it in the personal finance space that when you find yourself in a hole, in a debt hole, you stop digging. So you have to stop borrowing. But however, it is psychology, as I've said. You feel like I just have to keep borrowing. And it becomes a cycle. Before you know it, you are trapped in there.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for that, Nyarazo. Now, my next question is, are there specific strategies or tools like debt consolidation that can help speed up the process of becoming debt-free? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of people would want to know about this.
Yes, so the strategies, even the last two I spoke about, those are strategies. Consolidation is also a strategy, though not highly recommended, but personally I had to use it at some point. The importance of consolidation is because when you borrow a lot, when you become over indebted, it's like you've borrowed from Tom, Dick, and Harry. You've borrowed from your neighbors, you've borrowed from your employer, you've borrowed from the bank. You have exhausted all your borrowing options, right? So you are all over the place, you're scattered. And sometimes it can be overwhelming to catch up, to say, oh, I have to pay this one, I have to pay. So how then that happens is you then put together all the debts. You find probably you end up with one loan. Say the bank now funds you to pay off all these other debts, and you only remain with one. So again, it goes back to psychology, and for some it becomes more motivating when you have to just deal with one lender. Is it a lender, a borrower?
Yeah.
Than having to be all over the place. Yeah.
Okay. Now, talking about debt, do you think there is what we call good debt?
A very important question because I've heard it a lot of times. So my only challenge is I base my teachings on biblical principles. And one of the scriptures that I have read is from Romans chapter 8, verse 13, which then says, let no debt remain unpaid except the debt to love. And for me, that is a good debt, a debt to love. But all these other debts, really, because I have seen what debt does to people, we can even say maybe it's a mortgage, maybe it's good debt. But if it's mortgage and you're now struggling to cope, to put food on the table, is that good? So really, it is difficult for me to answer in terms of good or bad debt. For some, they will tell you that yes, if it is not consumer debt, it's good, but consumer debts are bad. And when you talk consumer or consumption debts, these are debts to fund things like food, groceries, clothes. These are things that are perishable for consumption. Those then they say. But yeah, I'm neither.
No, that's fine. Oh, thank you very much for that response. Now, when we come back to the second segment, we're going to be focusing more on how one can avoid, getting in debt. So thank you very much for sharing these insights with us in this first segment.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much, viewers, for joining us for the first segment of Your Wealth, where we are talking about becoming debt-free in this year 2025. As you've heard from Nyarazo, there is really nothing that we can call a good debt except that which is love. So make sure that you stay tuned to the show so that you know how to become debt-free. Do stand by for the second segment. Welcome back to the second segment of Your Wealth, and today we are joined by Nyarazo, who is a financial educator, and she's helping us on how to become debt-free as we enter into the year 2025. So this is a very important show that you need to be very, 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 putting focus on, because you learn one or two things that will help you to become debt-free in this year 2025. So we're just going to be continuing with this conversation, and I really want you to take notes on this one, especially this second segment. Nyaradzo, welcome back to the second segment.
Thank you.
Now, we want to talk about how one can avoid debt. So my next question to you will be, what are practical steps individuals or businesses can take to avoid relying on borrowing?
Yeah, so one of the most important is to have savings, because when you have savings, you have maybe an emergency fund, if I can call it that. When you have that, it means when you have an emergency, you know to always access your emergency fund. But when you don't have anything, that is when you end up borrowing. Do you know that when you don't have savings, you can end up borrowing tomatoes from the street vendor because you had not saved any money to buy tomatoes, something so basic, and it happens, so to prevent that, very important that one should have an emergency fund. And maybe I can just zoom into the emergency fund for a bit, because it is very important. And normally we then recommend that you have 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses in your emergency fund. And as you can see, I'm not putting a figure there because people differ. So I may be surviving on a $300 per month, budget, but you may be on a $1,000 budget. So which means I have to have 300 times 300, which is 300 times 3, which is 900. You have to have 1,000 times 3, which is 3,000. So these are funds that you have to set aside. And when you have that, and somehow when you have money stashed, emergencies then don't happen as much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because when you talk about saving money for times when you need it, when it becomes an emergency, it's something that is not in people's mind, because for them, emergency, you just find ways.
When it happens.
When it happens, that's when you. But I think you're raising a very important point, where one needs to be very disciplined,
Right.
to ensure that they do save, and ensure that when that time comes,
Yes.
they've got something that they can, rely on.
Yeah.
Now, how important is budgeting? Because I understand when we're talking about issues to do with debt, for one to get in debt, it means there was lack of budgeting, or there was lack of one sticking to the budget.
Yes.
Yeah. So how important is budgeting, and what are some tips for creating and sticking to an effective budget?
Right. So you're right that sometimes people end up borrowing because either there was no budget at all, or there was a budget and then we did not stick to the budget. So how does one get to stick to the budget? Is that the question?
Yeah.
It's very important that again we go back to the mind, because someone said to me, a made-up mind, there's nothing as powerful as a made-up mind. So when you tell yourself that I'm going to stick to this, it's you, because you know the ripple effect of not sticking to the budget. So it's very important that you have a budget to start with. And I normally then help to just say, how do you budget in a way that is not too restrictive, because you also want some flexibility when you have your money. So I recommend the 50-30-20 rule, and what that implies is just that 50% should go towards your needs. And when we talk needs, we are saying the things that you cannot do without. So 50% your needs, 30% your wants, and 20% your savings, your investments, and charitable giving. But when you are in debt now, I kind of want to twist it a little bit. So 50 your needs, and then 30 your debt repayment, savings, investments, and then 20 your wants.
Okay.
So I have already defined the needs. These are the things you cannot do without. We are talking of maybe groceries. You need to eat, right? So that you need a place to stay, so your rentals. And then when we talk of wants, these are things that you can do without. Really, maybe you want to go out, catch a movie with a friend. You can literally do without watching movies for a season as you recover, and then once it's important to have it so that as I said, you want it to be flexible, you don't want to restrict yourself. So have fun, but within the confines of your budget, right? And then we talk of the 30%, which I then call savings. So there, I'm just saying savings, but that's where the savings, debt repayment, your investments, and very important actually that even when you are in debt, you save. So I know sometimes it can be, when you're struggling in debt, you feel like, how can I even have money to put aside? But emergencies come. And as I was saying, emergencies come, especially when you're least prepared. So even when you are paying off debt, make sure you are saving, but have a certain percentage allocated to debt repayment every month.
Every month. I think what you've said is very important, because sometimes when you're then trying to pay the debt, you find yourself not being able to save because you're putting more focus on repaying this debt. So you also need to save even whilst you're still in debt.
Correct.
All right. Well, my next question will be, how can one identify and cut unnecessary expenses without feeling deprived?
To identify unnecessary expenses, and already we have gone through the 50-30-20 where I was saying your needs, your wants. But again, it's very important that you define your needs and you define your wants, because I think that right there is a very important process in differentiating the two. What are my needs may not necessarily be the needs of the next person. So again, these are, they come back to the individual. I love to then sit down with somebody and just have a look at all the things that will be, that they pay every month. So what do your expenses look like on a monthly basis? The best thing to do is probably to write down as you spend. If you have a bank statement, you can also be checking when you're swiping, what is it that you're swiping for. Sometimes it's the different things that you maybe swipe, maybe eco cash, I don't know, different things, but for you to be able to tell what are my expenses, and when you know now the different kind of expenses, you will know that this is a need for me. I cannot do without this expense. I cannot do without this one, or this I can do without. So when you separate, when there's that clear demarcation of needs and wants, very, very important that we start there. I hope I have answered the question.
No, you have. Oh, you have really answered the question, because I think what was major here was to know how you define the needs and the wants. So I think you really did justice to that. And I think one takeaway point from this segment is that have fun within your budget confines. When we say budgeting, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be strict on yourself, and not put aside money where you enjoy and stuff like that. So thank you very much for sharing that. Viewers, thank you very much for joining us for the second segment. Do stand by for the third and final segment. Welcome to the final segment of Your Wealth, where we are talking about how one can become debt-free as they get into the year 2025. And I'm joined by Nyaradzo, a financial educator, who's helping us, giving us tips on how you can move the road of 2025 without having stress of being in debt. And if you are in debt, how you can come out of debt. So thank you very much once again, Nyaradzo, for coming through and sharing this knowledge with us.
Thank you.
Now, let me get straight to my next question. Now I want to deal on the mindset and habits of individuals in regards to debt. So how can individuals or businesses shift their mindset towards long-term financial health?
Yeah, so again, mindset it depends with the individual. And as I said before, there's nothing as powerful as a made-up mind. And when you have already made up your mind that this is the way I'm going to go, you know, when anything else comes, maybe anything comes shining like a diamond, you know that no, this is not what I want. This is so. It's very important that the mind, you determine what it is exactly that you want. Another important thing around mindset, or if I can talk of psychology, and some may call it the psychology of money, is the presence of biases. So we do have a lot different kinds of biases that are there, and it's just, for example, when you're so happy, sometimes you tend to spend more. I have examples of people. Let's say you are at a family gathering, and then you hear, oh, your sister is getting married. Without thinking or consulting anyone, you're like, I'm going to give cows to this, you know. So it's out of excitement, right? So it again, it's the that's it has to do with the psychology around money. That, but you would have made up your mind maybe that I'm not going to do it, but because of excitement, we tend to do those things. And again, so it can be around emotions, many other things. So you have to make up your mind. In a nutshell, this is what I'm just saying. You have to make up your mind that maybe for high expenses, if I'm to buy anything above $100, perhaps I'm going to sleep over it. I'm not just going to commit to buying something just because. Sometimes a friend comes and says, I'm selling shoes, like ladies, we love shoes, and without even thinking of it, like, I want 3 pairs. I want 3 pairs. I'm going to support your business. The next thing you realize, I don't have money to finish off the month, right? So you really have to make up your mind. These things happen to the best of us, but when you make up your mind, the simple things like I have to write down, I have to know how much I have to sleep over some of these things, then
All right.
very important.
No, thank you very much. Now, what role does discipline play in achieving financial freedom, and how can one stay motivated?
Discipline. I think discipline is all this that we've also been talking about. You did mention that sometimes people end up in debt because they did not stick to a budget, as an example. Already that shows a lack of discipline. So discipline, it does play a very big role in financial management. Why? Because without it, you end up doing all these things I was saying. When you're excited, you splurge, things like that. And then when you're emotional, you end up spending money that you never thought you would. But when you are disciplined, you create, if I can say, a system around yourself that this is what I'm going to do. So for example, simple things like I go shopping once a week. Because if you just shop as and when you want, you end up buying things you never thought you wanted to buy. So you tell yourself, this is a restriction I'm giving myself. I'm going to buy, and when I buy, I'm going to use a shopping list. If that thing was not on the list, it's not going to be bought. But we sometimes tend to say, I forgot to put it. So these are just probably things that we need to have systems around ourselves that will help us to be disciplined when it comes to money. Even having somebody just to be accountable to, very important. The way we buy, if you also tell yourself that I'm not going to be buying on credit. In Zimbabwe, we don't have much of that, but in some developed countries, you hear of credit cards. So anytime you just want, you make use of your credit card. But if you then determine in your heart that I'm going to be disciplined, if I use this credit card, I'm going to pay it off that same month, so that you use it as a debit card. You know that, okay, maybe I'm not going to be swiping, I'm going to have cash, and when I want to buy, when I know that the cash for groceries is done, that's it, you know. So it's, again, discipline comes back down to you as an individual. Right.
Well, I think for Zimbabwe, it sometimes then becomes hard, considering that you now have malls all over, you know. So for you to say, I'm not going shopping every single day, can be tricky because as you're going to work, coming
You're
back from
passing
work, you're
through-
passing through malls.
Do you see?
You see all of these things. So I think, yeah, it really needs one to be
The
really.
whole thing is conspiring against us. Like when you say I don't want to do this, then all of a sudden there's another shopping mall. There's someone passing by with.
Passing by.
But yes, you have to be disciplined.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah.
And now I think talking about credit cards, I think it's something that is a blessing to Zimbabweans that we don't have it,
I think so.
that much because there's going to be a crisis. People will be like,
Yes.
stressed over, these debts because imagine anytime you can
You
just go
just-
swipe.
Swipe just like that. Yes.
Or now, moving forward to our next question, what are there any common financial mistakes to avoid when working towards becoming debt-free?
There are a lot actually, and these also depend again on individuals. But I can also maybe just mention a few. And like I have already said, that to avoid shopping unnecessarily, seeing a mall doesn't necessarily mean you have to go and see. Sometimes you just have to, because you don't die if you don't pass through a mall, right? But the moment you go in, you see things that you never knew were there, and all of a sudden you can't do without them. So you would rather avoid such things. There are also subscriptions. I know you also fell prey to these at some point, where you are paying subscriptions for anything. It could be you are subscribing to maybe to get for an app that you don't even use, and you're paying it every month. Or maybe you have so many accounts all over the place, and each account is being charged $5 every month, but you don't even use it. So or maybe the gym. Normally when the year is starting, people want to keep fit, and they're subscribing to the gym. 3 months down the line, they don't see the gym, but they keep paying every month. So these are important things just to look out for: subscriptions, just putting yourself out there where you're going to be spending. And for me, one other thing that really works is to keep money in higher denominations. So I feel it's again, it's psychology, that it's hard for me to take out my $100 note than it is a $5, because when you take it, the moment it's broken into smaller, you spend it. So when it's kept, so quite a lot that we can share, and some of these things you can freely find them on some of my social media platforms. Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Nyazo, for coming through and sharing this insightful knowledge with us right here on Your Wealth.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much, viewers, for joining us right here on Your Wealth. I believe that you have learnt a lot, especially on this particular program, because we were talking about something that is very, very important as we're getting into the year 2025, how to become debt-free. And I think it's supposed to be one of your goals to say, you know what, as I get in 2025, I do not want to acquire any debt. So I think this program has given you tips on how you can become debt-free. Thank you very much once again for joining us right here on Your Wealth. My name is Kudzi. Good night.